could go 3 or 4 days without hearing a drone or an explosion, especially in Dnipro. And we're about 2 hours from the front line. But Putin does want you to believe he's smashing the whole of Ukraine. Yes, it is bad when it comes in. Yes, it comes bad into Kiev, but there are large parts of Ukraine that are not even touched.
For everything that the Ukrainians seem to invent, the Russians then seem to somehow steal the plans, and they've got a mass that they can put behind it, especially with Chinese and North Korean support and elsewhere, and bring the technology in. Who's winning the drone battle and the technology battle on the front lines at the moment?
It depends. I've heard two sides that Ukraine's got the innovations and technology and doing very well, and I've also heard Russia's up their quantities. But you can just see by now Zelensky's confidence in speaking about launching drone attacks every day into Russia. This is now we're seeing blackouts in Moscow, blackouts in Belgrade. This is their oil industry's taken a right tonking. The manufacturing's done. They're now having to, bring people in from India and North Korea to manufacture because they've killed a generation. Putin's killed a generation of Russians. I mean, we don't talk about it enough how bad Russia and the economy and how they're dealing with this SMO actually is. The Western media is so concentrated on Ukraine, and the news is quite biased. So you find yourself that, that's how I got into social media. That's how I got into news, because I spent a large part of my army career underneath it. I didn't want anybody to know who I was. So, for me to come out and appear on here to talk about it is quite new to me. So I understand the value of that, but it's not the same reporting. It's very overestimation of Russia and an underestimation of Ukraine. And 4 years later, they're still doing it. They don't understand that Ukraine fights for time. And it always has from day one.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. It's a drum that I've been banging for quite a while, because a lot of commentators want to focus on who's winning by how much the front line has shifted. If it's gone a few meters in the Russians' way, the Russians must be winning. But that's a tactical battle. Most wars you are not won or lost purely on the tactical fight. You've got the tactical battle there. You then got the operational level fight, which is the ability of a nation to continue to support its tactical forces. And that's where Ukraine is taking the fight to the Russians with the Flamingo missiles, attacking its ability to pay for the continued operation, attacking the manufacturing capability, the rail infrastructure for logistics, the command and control that's there, assassinating generals, attacking airports so that aircraft can't take off from them, and having to push them further back. And when you look at the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong, whenever they were confronted by a US general who said we didn't lose a single tactical battle, the head of the Viet Cong went, so? And I think that sums it up. Do you think it's right that that Ukraine is focusing on this operational level? And do you think that's where this war is going to be decided?
Yes, I do. I don't think they had. I've been saying for 2 years the innovations, it will be what they can build domestically will win this war, not what we can supply them. And they're doing that. It's always been the case. I do. It's not perfect in Ukraine. Obviously, they've got their own issues. Corruption scandal just recently happened. Manning levels, mobilization. I've been a critic of that. So I'm not sitting there saying it's all great in Ukraine, because it's not. It's been very scary, very, up and down ride. And even last night in Dnipro, we got hits very, very bad, and I'm able living here to report that and talk to people about that, when many journalists don't stay in the country for very long. So I don't think, firstly, I've got a privilege of really staying silent. So I'm able to talk about those things quite considerably. But yeah, certainly. I mean, I think the attack in the infrastructure is key. Even down to the fuel trains that are coming in. If you have it was quite well known that the Russians had built, railway lines all the way along the Azov coast to try and get supplies into Crimea. But if you bring a fuel train down on it and the Ukrainians take it out, that train's now stuck on that line. You can't bring any more trains in to supply Crimea. So, the Ukrainians are learning too, and hitting the lines and the infrastructure and the supply routes is really what Ukraine are really good at. And they don't mind losing some territory to then get a better advantage, bring them in and kill more Russians. Because even if Pokrovsk, they do pull out of Pokrovsk, the Russians have to do this all over again somewhere else. So if they're going to kill, 20, 30,000 in Pokrovsk, they're going to pull back. The war's going to shift somewhere else, and they're just going to have to kill another 20, 30,000 Russians in the next town they try to bulldoze.
Well, again, you described perfectly another planned military operation, which is trading space for time. And the one thing Ukraine has got are lots of destroyed villages with very few civilians living in them anymore that they can trade, provided they're using the time and that space to good effect. Do you think that they will have prepared further fallback positions outside Pokrovsk should the military commanders decide that it's militarily better for them to let the Russians occupy that territory and fall back to other positions, or that's something that doesn't seem to be being talked about anywhere at the moment?
I've been and seen them actually. I went there a year ago. I stood in those second, third line trenches, dragon's teeth, tank ditches, razor wire. Then they've got the artillery. Plus, even a year on from when I went there, you've now got better air capability. You've got new aircraft, F-16s. You've just got. It's a totally different war now. So if they couldn't do it 12 months ago, they're going to find it incredibly hard to get in past Pokrovsk and out. My own thought is they will try and move up towards Izium and that way, and try and join up with the Russians there and concentrate in that area before they push on past Pokrovsk. But you got to remember, Putin has really annexed more territory than he's actually got. The more I talk about this, the more it's resonating with people that, it's an absolute failure. So even if he did want to stop now, it's going to be a failure for Putin. So I've always been of the idea he isn't going to stop. He's going to keep going. He's going to push on. So it's been very hard for me these last several months to see these so-called peace talks with the people that Trump sent, knowing full well that Putin was just not going to stop. He's going to go for Kiev. He's always wanted Kiev. That's what he wants. It's been an extremely hard 6 months.
Well, yes, but the Ukrainians, seem to be having some success. The Russians keep saying, as you said earlier, that they've taken Pokrovsk and they've completely surrounded it. But there was a report just earlier this week from the Ukrainian the head of the Ukrainian military that turned around and said that the general staff stated that as of 15th of November, Ukrainian forces had liberated 189 square kilometers and cleared nearly 260 square kilometers in the Pokrovsk district. That's completely opposite to what we're hearing out of the Russians and seems to be bleaching into mainstream Western press. Who do you believe?
Certainly, I would believe the Ukrainians above the Russians, not because I'm pro-Ukrainian. I've seen the other side. I've been in the other side. I know I've been in prison with guys who criticized the military, and there are new laws that stop you from even criticizing the military in Russia. So, look at the military bloggers on the other side have been restricted, cut down, controlled, contained. So I would definitely, having been on the front lines, I know the reporting that goes on the front lines. At 5 o'clock every day, you've got to put your figures in. That's collated to a central point. And if you don't put those figures in, then you could be in some serious trouble. So, I would tend to believe more so the Ukrainians' figures because I've been here and worked here and seen it. Certainly, the Russians, you've just seen what's happened with Pokrovsk. We've encircled it, bring the press with you. It's not, they're still stuck in World War II and the big propaganda jobs. The Statue of Liberty is kaput. It's still hasn't moved on very far. And when you've been trained in resistance and survival, and my courses that I did was sort of 30 years ago, and I was putting it into practice in 2022, you realize that some elements of the Russian military haven't moved very far from, the Second World War.
But you've got first-hand experience, albeit a few years ago, of the Russian troops, and you must have talked to them and understand their morale, motivation, all the rest of it. And you must be talking to Ukrainian troops at the moment who have or potentially captured Russian troops to find out how that morale is changing in the front line. What do you think it's like for a Russian soldier in the front line at the minute?
Well, I've spoken to them. I was invited to see captured Russian soldiers in the the west of Ukraine, and while I had to be very, very careful of abiding with the Geneva Conventions, uh, really we were only able to talk to them if they agreed to talk to us. And when they realised I was a prisoner and not press held in Russia, we couldn't keep them away after that. So they wanted to chat. So we talked to a few Wagner people. We talked to many foreigners that Russia is now moving into the Russian military from some of the poorest places on the planet. We spoke to many from the Middle East and Africa who were, recruited by criminal gangs and moved to areas where there were consulates and embassies so that they could sign up and get a tourist visa. And those restrictions allowed these foreigners en masse to come over. Within 2 weeks. They were in Russia, and many of the visas that they issued, the Russians know that the Africans or the people from the Middle East will overstay those visas and work illegally, and that's where they get them. That's where they contract them to then fight in the Russian military. And many of these guys were demoralized. Why are we not being exchanged? Why are we still here? We're watching white ethnic Russians get exchanged and go home. And I was trying to explain to them that there is no humanitarian rights in Russia. There's no access from the Red Cross. I got no access from the Red Cross. So, you're probably going to be here to the end of the war because, we know there are, Australians and Americans that are captured on the Russian side. We want to get them home so we could get our guys back. But Putin isn't exchanging them. So their morale is rock bottom. And the reason he doesn't want them home, because they'll tell the rest of the Russians the reality of what it's like. So he's going to keep those people here, in Ukraine. So that being said, the will to fight for the Ukrainians is still there. It's not changed. Probably made us more angry. We're tired. We're extremely tired. We have problems, but generally the will to fight is still there.
But again, you're looking from the Ukrainian perspective. We saw reports this morning of a missile strike on Kharkiv region killing a 17-year-old girl, alongside reports of emergency power outages across the country. Is that affecting Ukrainian civilian morale and therefore the support that there is for the government to continue the fight against the Russians?
No, not that I see. Corruption has that effect for sure. I mean, that's caused a lot of outrage. For example, my wife, who really doesn't really talk about politics, was really outraged at that. She was even talking to me about it, which is quite,
But do you think it's a good thing that the corruption's come out and it shows that the Ukrainian government has got processes in place now to identify and expose the corruption, whereas in the old days of Ukraine, as part of the Soviet structure and almost before Zelensky came in, then that sort of corruption would have been pushed under the table because it was, the people that were carrying it out were all powerful. So those that are corrupt have got nowhere to hide anymore.
No, absolutely. It's very much why you're not seeing protests now in Kiev and a repeat of summer because, the system is working. It is catching these people out. So I suspect that because of the Ukrainians who they are, they would be protesting in Kiev by now. There's small protests, but nothing like we saw in the summer. So yes, it is working. But I mean, yeah, it's heartbreaking. These attacks last night in Dnipro, they are heartbreaking. But you've got to remember, these cities are huge. Unless you're in Kharkiv or Pokrovsk, you can spend most of your days not even knowing there's a war on. So, you can go 3 or 4 days without hearing a drone or an explosion, especially in Dnipro. And we're about 2 hours from the front line. But Putin does want you to believe he's smashing the whole of Ukraine. Yes, it is bad when it comes in. Yes, it comes bad into Kiev. But there are large parts of Ukraine that are not even touched. So, it is a bit of a propaganda win for Putin. But yeah, I don't see the problems on the front of the war, the problems, but the corruption, yeah, that's a biggie.
So finally and briefly, what's going to happen next year?
Yeah, I mean that's a personally, I mean, I'd love to see Russia collapse economically and this whole war stop and walk straight back into Mariupol. But realistically, I think what you're going to see is a lot of other fronts, not militarily, but other fronts come into play. Economics, for sure. We're going to see that come to attrition next year. Possibly more sabotage and deflective operations by Russia while it is trying to draw attention from Ukraine. What it's going to plan next, I don't know. You're going to see more innovations from Ukraine, probably another Operation Spider's Web somewhere. I mean, there's going to be something like that coming about. Yeah, so I mean, even Bunov over the last week was saying, we're going to be doing some more operations. So, it's not over. And I keep telling people about this power shift and how when I was in captivity, the Russians were extremely scared of the SBU, the Ukrainian version of the FSB. They wouldn't let me ring anybody in Ukraine. They were scared of them tracking. It's very much like that, and I think it's starting to even up a bit, even though Russia hold 20% of the country. I don't think they're going to push on. I'm not too worried about if Pokos falls, that's going to change the outcome of the war. It's certainly not. You touched on it earlier. I think we don't have front lines as such anymore. We have 20-kilometer kill zones. If you want to put all your soldiers in, I wish Russia would put all their soldiers in that 20-kilometer kill zone because they wouldn't last 5 minutes. So you want quick reaction force. This war is changing. Nobody's fought in a war like this before, especially Americans, the Brits, Europe. This is unique to Ukraine and Russia, so everybody's learning. So it's very difficult to sort of predict what's going to happen next year.
Well, that's in some ways encouraging because it'll give us more opportunities to talk, but in other ways it's sad that the war is going to continue. But Shaun Pinner, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today on Times Radio Frontline.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
You've been watching Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you'd like access to exclusive content, please subscribe to Times Radio membership and watch us on YouTube. But you can now get us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. And don't forget, you can also listen to Times Radio for the latest updates on global affairs and read about them at thetimes.com. Thank you.